Hi, Joe. Welcome back to the show.
Hey, Jason. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Joe, we do a lot of drunk driving defense, but one of the things that we don't get to see is what happens to a person's insurance after the case happens. Can you give us a little bit of rundown of, well, first, basically, how does insurance work with regarding the point system, but also what happens when there's a major violation such as a drunk driving offense?
Of course, yeah, I'd be happy to explain a little more about that. Let me first say that Massachusetts is brutal in terms of auto insurance, and nationwide auto insurance right now is through the roof. It's a hard market, so premiums are only going up. In Mass specifically, we have what's called the SDIP program. It was put in place back in 2006, but it's called the Safe Driver Insurance Plan. And that's essentially, it rewards good driving history. And if you have accidents, tickets, DUIs, major claims, you're going to get penalized, and those points relate to exact dollar amounts, which we can go through roughly right now, so you and your clients have a good idea of what, as a situation like a DUI, what that's going to cost them from an insurance perspective. So back to SDIP. Everyone in Mass, if you live in Mass, you drive a vehicle, whether it's on a commercial or an auto or a personal auto policy, you have an SDIP number, right? So let's say if you have a minor traffic violation, that's going to be 2 points. Right? So think about speeding. You had a speeding ticket in the last couple of years. That's 2 points on your SDIP. Let's talk about a minor at-fault accident. That's going to be 3 points. That would be if the claim is over $500 and under $2,000. That's 3 points on your SDIP. Let's talk about a major at-fault accident, right? So let's think of something big, something you're at fault for that's over $2,000. That's going to be 4 points on your SDIP. And then we get to DUIs. That's factored into the major traffic violation segment, which is for 5 points. DUIs, reckless driving, those are the two big ones that we see. If that was to happen to be 5 points added to your SDIP. Now, I keep going back to that. Well, the insurance companies use that program to come up with your premiums, right? So let's go through a quick example. So let's say in the last couple of years, you have a minor violation, so a speeding ticket. That's 2 points. And let's say minor fender bender that you're at fault, right? It's nothing big, but now we're up to 3, so that's 5 points. You add 3 onto that, and then unfortunately there's a drunk driving, your DUI. That's another 5, so we're up to 10 points. We tell our clients based on what we're seeing, 1 point is equivalent to about 75 to 150 premium dollars annually. So when we think, 10 points, rough math. Let's do $100 a point. You can see how quickly that, an extra $1,000 on your auto policy for the foreseeable future, how that's going to affect you.
And how long does those points last on your record?
So they look back 5 to 6 years. Now you got to look at specific carriers and specific situations, but they're looking back 5 or 6 years. Now, if you have a good run, you go 3-4 years clean. They can add additional credits on there. There's excellent driver discounts. There's excellent driver discount plus. So there are some things that different insurance companies can play around with, but most of it is dictated by the state. And again, they're going to look back 5 or 6 years. So one mistake is going to cost you for at least a couple of years.
So hypothetically, if you got into several car accidents that you're all kind of at fault, and even if it's not criminal in nature, you could be looking at over 10 points. And now we're talking about an extra $1,500, $2,000 according to your estimate, obviously.
Right. And something else to keep in mind is too, think about the insurance company, if they were on your policy and they experienced all those claims, well, they lost a lot of money during that time, right?
Right.
So they may say, you know what, this is a bad risk for us. We're going to get off of this auto policy. We're going to non-renew them. Well, now you need to find another insurance company. And if the other insurance company sees, oh, this guy, this individual has an SDIP of 10, well, we're not comfortable quoting him at this dollar amount. Yes, we're going to add the SDIP, but we're also going to put an extra charge on top of that. It's going to be even more expensive.
Ooh.
So there are things that you can play around with there that insurance companies, if they see you have a bad record and they see frequency and severity, it's going to be really, really expensive. And then it could get to a point where no one's willing to quote you. At that point, you got to go into the MAIP program, which you don't want to go into there either. Not only is service worse, but premiums are more expensive. So we try to keep those driving records clean.
Yeah, before you get to that, because I do want to talk about that also. So what's like a really high premium? We're talking about like $8,000 to $10,000 a year. Like what's a high premium that you see?
Well, so it depends on where you're garaged, right? That's one of the biggest factors, other than the SDIP points. But let's say you live in Boston, right? Compared to if you live outside the city, if you live in Western Mass, the chances of getting in an accident due to traffic and distractions in Boston is a lot more likely than outside the city. So garaging plays a factor. Closer you are to the city, generally it's more expensive. But yeah, I mean, a single auto policy, yeah, you could see something $5, $6, $7, $8,000. You also got to factor in the value of a car. If you're driving a Lamborghini versus a 2000 Honda Accord, not that there's anything wrong with the Honda Accord. I've driven one myself. I love those cars. They drive forever. The premium is going to be much different. So there's a lot of factors there, but the one that you can control is your SDIP, right? You take care of your safe driving, you'll see credits back. So that's the one you gotta focus on that.
So then you said if no one's going to quote you, there's this program that are they mandatory? They're required to give you a quote?
Correct. So it's essentially the state would then step in. If you can't get a voluntary quote, right? Okay. So your insurance agent goes to every insurance company, and then you go and you check with Geico, Progressive. No one's willing to quote you. You can go through the mass auto insurance plan through an agent, and they will place you with one of those companies. It's called involuntary, right? So they place you there. Okay. The service is not as great because you're a bad risk, and the premiums are much more expensive. The only way to get out of that is to get someone to quote you voluntarily. The only way they'll do that is if your safe driving history improves significantly. So if you do find yourself in a situation where you have to go to the involuntary market, driving safely, paying attention to the roads, avoiding those large claims, you need a good couple of years of of history, and then you get a shot at getting out, and everything can, improve from there.
Well, man, I got so many more questions for you, Joe. So two particular ones. One, is there a situation where there's only one incident, but the incident is so bad that a car insurance company will say, you know what, we're not going to quote you?
Yes, that could happen. Yes, you get in a really bad accident, you're at fault, God forbid someone gets seriously hurt or dies, and you're talking, $1 million of coverage, right? You have your $1 million of your liability. Right. And then hopefully you're carrying $1 million or more of an umbrella over that. So you're stacking those for $2 million. Let's say you get a large claim that's breaching that umbrella, of course, because think about, let's say you're paying $3,000, $2,000 for your auto insurance that year. And now the insurance company on that one claim paying out a couple million or over $1 million. Yes, they can choose to get off of it whenever they deem fit. They can choose to get off of something if, there's a car that doesn't fit into their appetite that you buy, or that you move somewhere that they don't feel comfortable quoting. Every insurance company has different areas and appetites of what they're willing to quote. So yes, all those factors, including a really bad claim, can get you non-renewed.
What about things like being a habitual traffic offender? Does that kind of lead insurance companies to think that you're a bad risk?
Yeah, it does, because how they look at it is, let's say it's really, really small. Let's say just speeding tickets are just really small fender benders, $200 here, $300 here. Well, an insurance company is going to look at that and say they're due for a big one, right? Frequency leads to severity. Okay. So they look at it and say, you know what, Joe's had 10 minor accidents. He's gotten really lucky. No one's gotten hurt. At some point, due to the amount of these getting into, something bad's going to happen. So although we've made money on Joe in his auto insurance, we don't want to be on that when that big claim, when that big one pops. So yes, they look at that and they can get off for that reason.
So another thing we were talking about, they do look at your history, right? So even though you might get 2 points in 1 year, say if you end up getting 1 or 2 speeding tickets in a 2 or 3 year span, that doesn't sound like something that will make people say, I'm not going to quote you anymore, because they had this long history of good driving.
Right. And some insurance companies actually, they have, I mentioned the safe driver discounts, but a lot of times your first minor at-fault accident, I'm talking minor, so remember, under $2,000 paid out, or 1 speeding ticket, they won't even add those points to your policy. They won't add that debit to it. So yes, and the ones here and there, we're all human. We all make mistakes, and accidents do happen. That's why you have these policies. Those one-offs, those ones and twosies, that's not a concern. It's when they see frequency, or those big ones, that's when you're going to run into issues where it's premiums are up, they're having trouble finding someone to quote you and add your coverage. Those are when you run into problems.
So Joe, what about things that are not driving related but insurance related, such as things like if a person was involved with insurance fraud, or if some other type of allowing someone who's not licensed to drive their car? Obviously, this is risky behavior, but it's not actually them themselves operating a vehicle. Are those red flags that insurance companies say, you know what, you're just too much risk for us to insure you?
Oh, definitely. So part of the application process and part of the due diligence of a broker like myself,
Right.
the middleman, you'd fill out an application with the insured. Let's say we were filling out your auto insurance policy, and there'd be questions on there like who will be driving the vehicle? Have you ever had insurance canceled in the past? You ever had, like you mentioned, insurance fraud? You ever been involved in any situations like that? And, there are situations where people are dishonest and fill those applications out incorrectly. And of course, things slip through the cracks, but you got to remember insurance fraud and filling out those applications incorrectly is, it's illegal. It's a federal crime. So to answer your question, yes, if there's red flags on an application or if they look at a history outside of driving, they can either not quote you, non-renew you midterm, knock it on the policy. So there are multiple factors that they will look at.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like at the end of the day, it's easy to get your insurance rate jacked up, but very difficult to get it actually go down.
Yes, well, once you put yourself in that situation, it's not impossible. My advice would be that to be with an agent or a company that has your best interest in mind, is willing to help you. Right, if you can find someone that's proactive with you and give you good practice tools. With yourself being more cautious on the road takes a couple of years once you're in hot water to get out of it. So my advice would be to just pay attention, be safe, and keep that safe driver insurance plan down, those numbers.
Well, Joe, I really appreciate your time, and let's have you back again soon.
Yeah, always a pleasure. Thanks, Jason.